Well, Thai people are casting their ballots in an election between three front runners, with coalition negotiations looking like the most probable result. Populist, progressive, and traditional parties are head to head in a vote which will show just how much influence jailed former leader Thaksin Chinawat still has. His daughter, Patriotic, was forced from office for mishandling relations with Cambodia. Amid a border conflict, incumbent Anutin Chanvirakul has tried to cast himself as the only candidate prepared for war. We're now joined by Bill Hayton, who's Associate Fellow at the Chatham House Asia Pacific Programme, joining us from London. Good to have you here, Bill.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How do you see this one playing out?
Well, I think it's going to be very similar to the outcome of the last one, really. The big question will be just how many votes, how many seats the People's Party, the most progressive of the 3/4 main contenders, are going to get, because that, I think, will be an indicator of how much the mood is shifting in Thailand. I think, at the grassroots, there's a desperate desire for change. The economy is slowing down. So many things are perceived to be stuck, that this sort of progressive, young, outgoing, alternative has been getting a lot of support. But it's a question of whether the conservative forces in Thailand will actually allow it to form a government, or whether they will block it once more.
But it does look different to previous elections, does it not, in the fact that there's the three potential contenders? Does that change things?
Well, not a huge amount, really. I mean, it's unlikely that any one of those three is going to, kind of win the 251 seats necessary to form a majority in the lower house. So there's going to be some kind of coalition, it's like this. And the question is, what kind of price will the other parties extract for that? And then the question of whether the monarchy, the military, the constitutional court, other sort of forces behind the scenes will try and, if you like, nobble the People's Party by getting some of their candidates disqualified, or, reducing their majority somehow, making them weaker. So, winning the election is only one part of this battle of forming a government in Thailand.
Yeah, so from what I've understood, you've basically still got the military essentially nominating the Constitutional Court, which has made decisions in recent years, such as forcing the party that won last time to dissolve, and also forcing Patriotic to step down. So, simply put, does the military still run the show?
No, that's slightly sort of too blunt, I think. But I mean, they are the power behind the throne. They have a huge amount of influence. I mean, the fact that there is an election and those elections are contested, and they are, as far as we can see at this point, free and fair, means the military aren't doing everything. But the fact that the military have sort of ramped up the nationalism, that they amplified and contributed to this border conflict with Cambodia, and that Anutin, the current prime minister, kind of really rode that wave of patriotism into this election, shows, I think, how the military are trying to, shape the election field. They're clearly, on the conservative end of the spectrum, they're clearly nationalistic. They're opposed to change. So I think they've done what they can behind the scenes. And if things get out of hand, there's always the option of the military coup, which they've used, twice in recent years. So, those who want democracy in Thailand will be hoping that the military stay in their barracks, and that this, remains a purely, electoral contest.
Yeah, what do you think Anutin and perhaps the military as well were expecting more of a stronger wave of nationalism to last longer up until this vote today? And now looking at the kind of polls, are they maybe considering plan Bs, plan Cs?
Well, I think the underlying factor is this sort of very slow rate of growth in Southeast Asian terms, and this sense that Thailand is being outcompeted by other countries in Southeast Asia, notably Vietnam. Western companies, even Chinese companies, investing in Vietnam as the new growth market rather than investing in Thailand. And that is a reflection of the political paralysis that's been going on in Thailand for the last decade or so, and this just general sense of the country being stuck. So those underlying sort of economic, how much money have you got in your pocket type questions, I think, eventually proved to be stronger than this sort of short-term flag-waving, let's attack Cambodia kind of patriotism.
And does that show that there is a disconnect between the military political elite and what they're perhaps concerned about, and actually what ordinary Thais are more concerned about, which is their purchasing power.
I think so. Yeah, I think if that is the divide, and the military wanted to create, this sort of sense of sticking by the flag and the nation, to sort of outflank the populists, so not the progressives, the People's Party, then I don't think it's worked. But they have a few more levers, kind of to pull behind the scenes, where they could block a progressive government. And I think the People's Party, which is ultimately the successor to the Move Forward Party, which was disbanded, they've learned a lot from their previous brushes. So they're going to try to avoid being pulled into a situation where they get banned once again. So if they're smarter, then it's possible we could see a more progressive government take shape in Thailand.
And that would be in the form of a coalition between that party and perhaps some of the more traditional powers?
I guess so. I mean, you've got a grand total of 57 parties running across all the different seats in Thailand in this election, and 400 of them are done on a constituency basis, 100 are done on a party list system. So it is possible you could end up sort of cobbling together some kind of grand coalition of the People's Party and more of the smaller ones, but that could be a nightmare to manage if it came into office. So I guess therefore you might I think you're going to see a coalition. What might be interesting is if the fourth party, the Democrat Party, which was once upon a time a governing party in Thailand, whether somehow they could win enough seats to give them a sort of king-making role. But it's all going to come down to the numbers at the end of the day. I mean, the polls close in a couple of hours. Results come, about sort of 3 hours after that, I think, or start to come. So it won't be long before we actually see the shape of any likely coalition.
And certainly in recent years, it's been rare talking this much about Thailand without talking about the Chinats and the dynasty left behind by Thaksin. So what remains of that?
Well, the fact that the candidate, for the Pheu Thai party is Thaksin's nephew, I think gives you some, good idea about the nature of the family control of that party. And he's still there. He's still trying to be influential. He's still pulling the strings. There's a huge divide between those who sort of love him and his populist gestures, his sort of handouts to the low-income households, that kind of thing. And those, mainly the sort of Bangkok elite who think he's, complete anathema and want to see him, removed from politics. He came to an accommodation which allowed him to return to the country. But clearly the fact that, his daughter, who was the prime minister up until July, was then pushed from office, in effect by the military because of a scandal involving a phone call she made to the ex-leader in Cambodia. I think that shows that there's still a huge degree of hostility towards him and the family from conservative forces in Thailand.
Bill Hayton from Chatham House, London, thank you so much for talking to us on the programme. Fascinating stuff.
Sure.